Cardinals have finally named their 26 for opening day, and we're going to break it all down here over the next, 30, 45, 60, 90 minutes here on Cards Hub 365, presented by Gray Bar here on Sports Hub STL. I'm Joe Roderick, joined alongside by Brendan Schaefer, our Cardinal insider. And Brendan, the news came out, and the biggest surprise, I think, at least to me, was Siani still on the roster. I guess we start there, maybe. What jumped out to you?
I think the biggest surprise about the announcements was not Matthew Liberatore being on the roster, but being in the rotation. I think that was bigger because, you work from like the most prominent role to the least. Siani's on the roster, and that's maybe a bit of a surprise if you held it in fact that Victor Scott was going to make the team, which I think it trended in a direction, Joe, where Victor Scott had to make the team. His performance in spring was as good as anybody else's on the team. And so the Cardinals make that decision. He's going to be their center fielder. That was the right call. Siani also being on the roster, probably the biggest surprise if you're Jose Fermin, who I guess reportedly was told he made the team and then ultimately did not make the team. So that's sort of, though, on the periphery of the roster. And understandably, there's some questions, I guess, about how that all went down.
What do you think happened there with Fermin?
It's a great question, and I don't know what happened because I wasn't reporting it originally. Yeah. But
I mean that's we haven't seen anything come out of that yet. Maybe in Memphis today.
Yeah,
I don't know what reporters are down in Memphis for that game they're playing tonight, but maybe there's a conversation with somebody somewhere about that.
Could be.
Was it miscommunication, or was it because you remember though? Katie Wu had said, they kind of asked on Saturday, and they said there's one conversation that needs to be had.
Right.
And this is after it was reported that Fermin was on the roster. So was that the question, or was it Liberatore to the rotation?
And maybe a conversation where Matt said to be told, hey, you're in the bullpen for now, but then we're going to go to the 6-man. That could have been any number of things, and that wouldn't be unusual for them to say, before we reveal everything, let us have this one conversation, because bottom line, somebody hadn't been told something that they needed to know before it became public, whether that was Siani or whether it was a pitcher. It doesn't make a difference.
So you think the conversation was between the coaching staff and a player?
I assume that it was Oliver Marmol telling a player the situation, whatever it was. Like I said, it could have been telling Matz that he's in the bullpen, telling Liberatore that he's in the rotation, telling Siani he's on the bench, but he's making the team. I don't think that's instructive. It doesn't really matter what that conversation was. There were 10 of them that happened, and that one was just happened to be the last one. Yeah. Now,
I kind of took that as maybe through the coaching staff that they had to sit down and it was a conversation. That's maybe the way I took it. Sure. But again, neither one of us were really down there to kind of get a feel of a lot of that, but that was the way I initially took it. But now looking back, it could have also
my interpretation was a decision's been made. We've got to tell the person what the impact of that decision is on that person, which again is something that happens a dozen times with a dozen different players that are on maybe the edge of the roster conversation. But you ask what I think happened. I think the fact that it was at least reported by Katie, who is very reliable and trustworthy, that Jose Fermin was told he made the team. I would think that means he was told he made the team, but I don't know how that, mishap ends up coming to fruition. What I would say is it suggests that it was a really close and contentious conversation toward the bitter end, as front office, coaching staff, manager, everybody is, trying to deliberate on exactly the best path forward, because there were obviously some surprises. I don't think many had on their bingo card Liberatore being in the rotation to begin on opening day, but you look at his spring and they continued to give him 2-3 innings at a time. And then when I was doing the Card Sub show on Saturday morning with Ethan Hannaford, we noted he's starting today, and you look at the pitching plan behind him, it's a lot of guys who are going to go maybe one inning. Seems like Liberatore is going to get 4 or 5, and it ended up being tweeted out right around while we were going. I think it was John Denton said 65 pitches was the target. Libby ended up throwing, I think, 71 pitches. So that's okay, he's in a spot where if something goes wrong elsewhere, he's ready to join this rotation. We noted that on Saturday. We just didn't know how the pieces of the puzzle were going to fit together. And I think, in a credit to the Cardinals, they said Liberatore's going to be in the rotation because this is a transition year. That is the first true transition year move that I think we have seen the Cardinals make, where they take a guy who, do we know if he's a starter or a reliever? We've been asking ourselves for years. A lot of fans have kind of been resigned to, he's a reliever, even if he wants to be a starter. But why not find out once and for all and say you're in the rotation, and then we know what your role is for 2026, whether that's starter, reliever, or on a different team because it doesn't go well. That is a transition year type of move. And I credit the Cardinals with that one.
So, and that's if you're making the transit, and again, we've been told since November of last year, like it was going to be a new look team. It really not a whole lot of new looks when you see it's a lot of familiar names that are there. If you're going to go with this transition year, this reset year, whatever you want to call it, that's not the word rebuild that you want to say. Matthew Liberatore earned his spot in that rotation. Victor Scott earned his spot in center field.
Yeah.
You could also argue that Michael McGreevy has earned his spot in the rotation with how well he pitched in spring. He went out there, and I think from the beginning it was hey, he's going to have to show us something that's going to, he's going to force his way into the rotation.
Yeah.
And damn it, I think he forced his way into that rotation, but now he's going to start in Memphis.
He's going to start in Memphis, and he's the one guy where, again, a lot of fans are pointing to, well, what about transition year? If it's good for Matthew Liberatore, why isn't it good enough for Michael McGreevy? And I think at a certain point, you do still have these roster clogs where you have to decide, where can you put these players? With Liberatore, he's a few years down the road compared to McGreevy in terms of experience. And so he's ahead in the pecking order, for better or worse. Like, if it was simply whoever has the best spring stats wins that job, you could do that. Let's say they do this same 6-man rotation thing, and it's McGreevy instead of Liberatore. Where does Liberatore go? Does he go?
Too many lefties in the bullpen. Then if Matz is also in there,
100%. And so, like, it actually fits together moderately decently to do it this way. And I credit the Cardinals for this too. I didn't think, as of Saturday, as I was noting, hey, Libby's starting today. Does anybody notice? Should we care? What does that mean? I didn't think, well, they're going to tell Steven Matz he's in the bullpen, at least for the beginning, because I looked at Steven Matz's spring, and he's also pitched well. Historically, the Cardinals, if there's a veteran who everybody's like, I don't know, he's kind of up for debate, and he pitches as well as Steven Matz did in spring, St. Louis Cardinals of the last few years are going to prioritize Steven Matz's spot, and the other guys are behind in the pecking order, and they've got to, scrap for whatever opportunity. And it kind of ends up with the way that Liberatore has been bopped back and forth between starter and reliever the past couple of years. I thought that's probably what they'll do again. I credit the Cardinals because as much as we've been asking for these changes and for things to actually look different, if it's going to be different, that's an example where you can finally say, Steven, you pitch really well, but we're going to prioritize Liberatore's development right now above where you're at because and it didn't have to be maybe spelled out this way for Steven Matz. I don't know what those conversations were like, but the reality is Matthew Liberatore might be on this team next year, and he might be in a starting role if it's valuable to the organization to have him in one. Steven Matz won't be because of contracts. So that actually is an example of the Cardinals doing, I think, what we've been looking for them to do all off season. Now, maybe that's the first example. You could also argue, though, Victor Scott is the second. It's a guy that's earned his opportunity. And so let's put him out there and see if we can jumpstart him into the center fielder of not only the future, but of the present. And he's earned the chance to do that. So, I mean, those couple of moves I do like.
I think I texted you, and I think it was Saturday. Was it Saturday or was it maybe yesterday when I was driving 17 hours
whatever
from Jupiter to St. Louis? I think I texted like the Cardinals. So essentially you can look at spring training and you can say that the number 1 and number 3 top performers from the pitchers in spring training for the Cardinals, neither one is in the rotation.
Which would be McGreevy
and
Steven Matz as the number 3, making Liberatore the 2.
I think number 2. Who would there be? I mean, from Fetty and Mikolas and Palante and
I think
Gray. Did any of those guys have a better spring than those guys?
No, and now Libby is interesting because he didn't start until the end, but he was still pitching in bulk to where you could make that connection of like, okay, maybe they're keeping him.
A lot of guys.
He was piggybacking. Maybe they're keeping him ready in case of an injury because, again, I said all spring you're going to have somebody get hurt. And guess what? For the first time in 10 years, they didn't have anybody from the rotation. I'll still knock on the wood that's nearby because technically, they're playing a game tonight in Memphis. So anything can happen. But one
of the healthier spring trainings from all of baseball, I think. That's fine.
You don't want to say that. That might be wood back there. I don't know about these shelves
units are made out of. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think that was unexpected.
Yeah.
You would figure that while you're kind of going through all these lanes with all these players in spring, eventually there's going to be an injury that's going to kind of dictate your path forward. And since there wasn't, I think that's why a lot of these conversations went down to the very end. But I credit the Cardinals on the Liberatore decision. McGreevy, it stinks. But again, I don't think the roster or the rotation on opening day is indicative of McGreevy's involvement this summer. Yeah. If I told you over under 14.5 starts for McGreevy in the big leagues, what would you take? Because I'm going over 14
this year? Yeah, yes, absolutely.
In the big leagues. So
yeah, in the big leagues. Yeah. And Ace points out, feel free to chime in the YouTube chat, give us your thoughts on the Cardinal roster construction, asking, do you think this will cause McGreevy any hard feelings? Absolutely not. No, he is still, when he starts, I mean, he pitched, did he have 2 starts last year in a relief appearance, I believe is what it was, or was it 3 starts that he got?
I think he had 1 appearance and then came back or something. Toward the end when he was pitching, I think he had 2 total, and the one was like maybe in San Francisco. He damn near had a chance to have a complete game, and I think they took him out for the 9th. But yeah, he's going to be just fine.
And so he still is going to be a rookie whenever he comes up this year. So there's no hard feelings. He is not, this is, again, there are far better prospects, I think, in all of baseball. And this is, I have become a huge McGreevy fan, wanting him in the rotation. I still want him in the rotation. And I can sit here and say that there are far better prospects in all of Major League Baseball who are not starting on the big league level that are better than Michael McGreevy is for, I would say, more ridiculous reasons. McGreevy is more of a numbers game type thing. I don't think it has anything to do with clocks or anything like that, to where around baseball, there are guys who are getting screwed probably because of the organization, their organization's not wanting them to start the clock yet.
Yeah, I don't think that's the case here. But let me ask you, so you're upset. A lot of Cardinals fans are understandably upset about McGreevy not being in the opening day rotation. Knowing the way that it's played out and knowing that they're telling Steven Matz, like, you pitch well in spring, you're going to be long relief, we'll keep you ready. April 16th is when we can kind of go with this 6-man rotation, which historically the Cardinals have never done, but it tells you that they're at least trying to find a way to have all these things happen at once with McGreevy and with Liberatore and all these guys put in place to be in a spot to contribute this year. Michael McGreevy, I think it's correct to not have him shoved into that bullpen role where we're asking you to do a bunch of different things. As much as, I think he showed last year that he maybe could thrive under those circumstances, because that's kind of what happened at the end of the year with him. I also think it's valuable to prioritize his development and do the best you can for it. And now that's finally what they're doing with Libby, which the last couple of years they haven't really done it with Libby. But let me ask you, knowing all the decisions as they're laid out, what would you have done differently to get McGreevy on the team today? And it's okay. Whatever your answer is okay. I'm curious for that conversation, though.
I think it would be, and again, because I don't think, you just don't see it. You just don't see it. They're not going to say to Mikolas, hey, we're cutting ties.
Sorry, buddy.
Yeah. Right. We're, you had a good run here. You were great with the organization. You did everything the right way. Your time's up. That's not going to happen. That will not happen.
Not on March 24th anyway.
Right.
But where I would look at is say what McGreevy has done and what Liberatore has done. And again, I don't think Quinn Matthews is he's on the doorstep, but he's not on he's not knocking on the door yet, but he just stepped onto the doorstep to be getting into that realm of consideration. But all of the prospects that are proving their readiness, you could even throw Graceffo into that conversation. What that's doing, I think, and I hope, and as much as I like Mikolas, I think that should put a little bit more pressure on Miles in the first 4 to 6 weeks of this season, where his performance probably should matter. And if it looks like it did last year, well, you've got all these guys that are in a transition year ready to take that spot. But I don't think you do that before the season begins. I don't think that's even remotely a conversation, because he is a veteran and you want to do right by veterans to the extent that you're able, and he's going to have an opportunity. But if it doesn't go well, will the Cardinals, like they're doing with this Liberatore Matz thing, maybe take a different stance with Mikolas, whether that's put him into the bullpen, something more permanent? I don't know, but I think he's going to have the opportunity, and rightfully so. They're paying him anyway, and you don't want to look the gift horse in the mouth. And by that, I mean, you don't want to say, we've got so many pitchers, let's get rid of one that logs 200 innings every year. Let's just kick him to the curb in March, because the injuries maybe haven't happened in spring, but over the course of time, they do happen a lot in April. The Cardinals are well protected against that with how they're handling this.
When we first heard the rumors of the 6-man rotation, it seemed at the time that it was more of a, God, we have 7 pitchers that could start for us.
Right.
Like we need to figure out, and only one of them ideally is going to start in Memphis. We got to say something. We got to come up with a plan. I wonder now if going into it and giving that April 16th kind of start date for that, I wonder if that's more a case of performance for someone like a Sonny Gray, because the velocity has been down and he's been getting hit hard, to where they might look at that and say, if something goes bad on the 27th, on Thursday this week, maybe we go get you checked out and we sit you down for 2 weeks. And that you're just saying the 6-man rotation just to give everybody a role,
because
to start
the math right now is on April 16th. If everybody stays healthy, the math is you'll have to have all 6 in the rotation, whether you want to or not.
And that's the case too. If that were to happen, and let's just, I mean, because something just does not seem right with Sonny Gray and some of his performances that he's had in spring. It just, is it age or is it health? It's something that I think we'll find out pretty quick at the start of the season.
Sure.
But even if that happens, let's just say let's say any of the starting 5 right now get hurt. I don't think McGreevy comes up and you keep that 6-man rotation. I think you stay with the 5-man and you bring up a relief pitcher instead.
I think that is probably accurate. Steven Matz will be built up to the point where he's able to slot right in. And the April 16th thing is a way to assure him, like, you're in this the next moment possible. Understand where we are as an organization. We hate to do this to you, Steven, because you're really earning an opportunity. And that's got to be tough for Steven Matz. And I don't like that. It's not fair, because the last 3 years they've kind of prioritized him and looked for reasons to give him a chance, and it hasn't really gone well. He hasn't consistently stayed healthy. And now that he's doing it for you in spring, which could be in his walk year for free agency to prolong his career and his earning potential, you as an organization are having to make that tough conversation with a veteran. But I think that's what Cardinals fans have been asking for. I don't think it's anything anti to Steven Matz, whether as a player or personally, but I think the organization is recognizing where it is and that it's in a tough spot because nobody got hurt, which is actually a good thing. It kind of goes back to that good problem to have conversation, which I guess we could relate to the offense and the fact that you've got 10 guys for 9 spots, rather than go, well, shoot, who's going to fill out the lineup? You kind of do have a good problem to have. There are 10 people that you want to play every day, and you can only play 9. But that means for somebody on a given day, you're going to have a conversation about what that looks like for their role. And again, I don't envy Oliver Marmol for that, because you can't possibly please everybody at once, but you have to make the decisions that are best for the organization until an injury, whether that's in the lineup or in the rotation, makes those decisions happen for you and makes it a little simpler.
Your thoughts continue to be welcome here on the YouTube chat. Chime in on your thoughts with the pitching and the Matthew Liberatore being named into that rotation. Steven Matz starting in the bullpen with a 6-man rotation. Mid-April is what they're saying.
April 16th, I believe,
starting in Memphis in the minor leagues. So the rest of the bullpen, I don't think there's any real.
No surprises. Roy Croft and
Leahy
were the 2 that made it, and they're the 2 that are relatively movable in terms of up and down the Memphis shuttle. I hope Roy Croft pitches well enough, like he did in spring, to not be somebody they want to option, but it's conceivable because he's got options. Leahy's got options, but the team seems to really like him, and he's done well. And just a reminder that Ryan Fernandez is technically in that bucket where he could be optioned for a fresh arm if and when push may come to shove at various points in the summer. But yeah, I think the bullpen was rather self-explanatory. And I guess the main thing you're looking for is hopefully Phil Maton gets up to speed rather quickly. But because he's a guy that spins it and isn't really a guy who's got to ramp up for the velo on a fastball, hopefully he ends up being able to assimilate. And I guess I saw that Nick Anderson went unclaimed, so we'll begin at Memphis. But remember, he'll have that out if the Cardinals don't decide early they want to have him on the roster. He's going to have that contractual right to look elsewhere at some point.
The Steven Matz, right now a lot of people in the chat, it's all very negative towards Miles Mikolas.
We can talk about that.
This one on Steven Matz too, by the way. He had 3 years and didn't show up. He was hurt. It wasn't that he didn't show up. He wasn't out there getting shelled. There were times last year he looked really good. He couldn't stay healthy, and as long as he's under contract, you're going to keep giving him those opportunities to earn the contract that he had, which right now is very team friendly too, as far as what the salary
$11
is.
million bucks for the last year. I mean, it depends on what you get out of him, but it's not killing you. The Mikolas thing is unfortunate, but you can go back to a time where they had nobody on the books for the following season, and it was very simple and easy to get him extended. I would have made the case at the time and did that. It's like, I get why it's easy. Probably don't need to do it. Where else would Miles Mikolas prefer to play if it's not Miami? Because those two teams train in Jupiter. You probably didn't need to do it, but that's an example of also when we talk about not cutting these guys loose now, eventually it'd be nice for St. Louis to get free agents again and to be in the market for free agents. And you don't want to treat free agents like dirt after you have already signed them, because it maybe doesn't look so good for future desires to sign free agents. So that's just another aspect of it, I think, to consider. And they did right by Miles Mikolas at the time, even though it wasn't probably the way, it may not even be the way that Chaim Bloom runs a front office, where you're going to crunch the numbers and you're going to be like, if we don't have to do this ahead of time, we're not going to do this. And I think financially that would have benefited the Cardinals. But in the same vein, they're going to give Mikolas the opportunity. He's looked okay in spring, and they'll see what it looks like early. But again, if you go June 1st and he's got a 5.5 ERA, I think this will be a different conversation than what it's been in years past.
From Jeff P. Walk your Matt's cooking incoming. And again,
I picked him up in fantasy in a league before they put him in the bullpen, because I thought he would be doing well as a starter, and he's not starting yet.
If you watched, a few weeks ago when they signed Phil Maton, and we kind of went over the graph of the possibilities of someone like a Phil Maton, I mean, that is a similar thing with Steven Matz, where if he's pitching really well and he's helping you win games and you're winning games, then you keep riding Matz. But if you're not winning games and he's pitching well, then sure, trade him away and see what you can get out of it.
Yeah.
Type thing. Or it's last year of the deal, so you just cut him loose.
You've got options, and it doesn't all have to happen today on day one. That's my thought on the pitching stuff. If you've got more,
hey, you're already up. The Cubs are already a full game back with their 0-2 start.
There you go. 2 in the loss column. So what are you gonna?
Right. You have a great start on them.
You never know. All right, so a lot of talk about the pitching. Continue to make your comments on the YouTube chat. And by the way, you do have to subscribe to the channel to comment, but it's really easy. It's free. Click subscribe and then throw your 2 cents into the live chat. But we started by speculating, was the Siani thing one of the bigger surprises? A lot of people don't see why Michael Siani is on the roster over Jose Fermin. I want your take on that of like, who did Joe Roderick want the bench to be? And then knowing how the Cardinals are operating, who do you think the bench should have been? Those can maybe be 2 different answers, but let's get into the Siani thing, because I think a lot of people are like, why is he on the team? And I maybe will have a different take than some with that.
So with that, you had 4 bench spots.
Okay.
One was going to Pages. You knew that.
Mm-hmm.
The other one was going to whoever is going to be on the bench between, I guess at this point it's Burleson or Gorman on day one.
On a given day.
You knew that was going to be the case, because you have 10 guys for 9 spots. I think we're all in agreement.
As long as we agree, like Victor needed to make the team, the Cardinals did right by putting him on the team. That's what happens. Is that other spot is your DH left-handed bat who's not DHing that day because there's no room. Okay.
Lucan Baker has hit his way onto the roster
and serves a role on the bench.
He is a right-handed bat off the bench. He is what you need there, because you don't need to continue to develop Lucan Baker in AAA anymore as a first baseman of the future, DH of the future. Luke, we know what Lucan Baker is.
He's going to rake, hopefully, against left-handed pitching in the 7th or 8th or 9th inning sometimes. Like, he's going to probably start very infrequently at first or at DH, but, you actually never know. If there's a day where you're facing a lefty starter, Herrera's your catcher instead of Pages, which I don't think is going to happen a ton. I think Pages will catch a lot against lefties because it could allow you to DH Herrera. But if it's the other way around, you could throw Lucan Baker in there as the DH. But okay, he's on your bench. That's 3. You've got 1 more spot.
That's where it comes in. And I never thought, once Victor Scott hit his way onto the team, I never thought that you were going to see Siani as that extra outfielder, because right now you have Burleson, you have Donovan, who can play outfield. You don't want them to be in the outfield that much,
right?
But they can both be out there, along with Nootbaar, Scott, Walker. That's 6 outfielders that you have. That's a lot of outfielders. So I really thought, again, and Bernie talked a lot about it. The Bernie Mikolas, the Bernie show, he talked a lot about it this morning. You go watch his video if you haven't already. He talks a lot about Mason Wynn this year and compares him to a lot of other young shortstops, where Brendan, I don't know if I've said it on the air. Maybe I have, but I know you and I have talked about it, that I am Mason Wynn 162 for Mason Wynn or bust. That's not 160 like Bobby Witt, not 161. I can't remember who went 161 last year. Maybe it was Willie Adames went 161. I know somebody else went 161. For me, it's 162 or bust for Mason Wynn. So you still want to have that backup infielder, I think, there.
You do or you don't?
You do. I still think if you're filling out a balanced roster,
okay,
I still think that's where.
But if Mason Wynn is playing 162, why do you? What's the utility of that role?
That's I guess that's where the injury.
That's my
the fact.
If he gets hurt, you can bring him up tomorrow.
Okay.
Or bring up Thomas Tajasi tomorrow, and he's your everyday shortstop now. Or whoever's going to be Barrero, whoever you decide it's going to be. So, like, to that question, you still don't agree with me on that, which is fine. You wanted to have a guy who could play that position and could play around, give you some flexibility as a defender, utility defender on your bench, essentially, which as of the day before yesterday, we all thought was going to be Jose Fermin.
And so did apparently Jose
Fermin. Apparently he thought that as well. Which, here's my one issue with that. If you're looking at Jose Fermin as needing to be that guy that's going to be your Mason Wynn backup, he's never played a shortstop inning in the big leagues. And I know that he's played it a bunch in the minors. Jose Fermin has never played a singular inning. I've said this all spring on shows because it's true. You can go look. He's never played an inning of shortstop in the big leagues, which is fine. I'm not telling you I've evaluated his shortstop defense and he can't do it. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is he's never done it for the St. Louis Cardinals. He's never been asked to do it. Right. He's been on this team a bunch of different times for various cups of coffee. That's never been a role that Oliver Marmol has said, hey, Jose, go out to shortstop, or he's never written that into his lineup. And I had a hard time believing that he would have his name written into the lineup, which is why I was like, interesting that they're not going with Barrero. And yes, it would have required a 40-man move. I just thought, for me, if that's what you want, it's not really too much of a useful fit, because I'm still skeptical. I'll believe it when I see it that they'll ever use him at short. I just think that's the evaluation from somewhere, is like, we view him as more of a second baseman, third baseman, utility guy. Not so sure about the defense at short, just because I haven't seen it before and they haven't asked him to do it. That being said, he did a really nice job offensively in spring. I think he earned a spot if that's the way you want to use that bench spot. But I think what Brendan Donovan provides you is that on a given day, you can arrange your team to not need that utility infield spot on your bench. I don't think it's here's what I'll say anyway. Maybe it would be nice to have. I think Michael Siani is more useful for the way that they're going to use him, which is as a super defender in the 7th, 8th, 9th inning in games the Cardinals lead by a run, where you're going to have Newt Barr in left, Siani in center, and Victor Scott in right. You are going to cover so much ground, and that's going to be such a blessing for your pitching staff. I think Oliver Marmol will do that more often than he would have asked Jose Fermin to be the next right-handed bat off the bench behind Lucan, who's going to take all of those first shot opportunities.
You don't need a second right-handed bat off the bench. You don't.
And Lucan's the guy.
If it comes down to that, and you have to throw Pages in there to be that next right-handed bat for some reason, and again,
which I hope they're willing to do, by the way, but we'll see, because that's the other thing of like not having a third catcher.
The best emergency catcher in baseball,
and I hope that he has to be. I hope he's not used, because it means everything's gone to plan and nobody got hurt. But I just continue to point out, like, if you had to, Wilson could catch 2 innings. He's not completely incapable.
I would hope that he's able to catch 9 innings.
He said he's still got his catching gear, but he's not.
I would think so. I mean, you got to imagine.
Like, would he be calling the game still? Depends on who the pitcher is, maybe. Like, does he have familiarity? He's not done any of that this spring. How old
is he? 32, 33?
Wilson? Yeah. Early 30s.
Okay. I mean, he's been catching for 25 years.
My point is, if in a normal circumstance, if you didn't have Wilson in that spot and you needed an emergency catcher, like Brendan Donovan's going to go back there and just catch the pitches. He's not going to probably call the game, right? Somebody from the dugout, the pitching coach, whoever, is going to have to, the pitcher might call his own game pitch count, right? If it's Wilson Contreras, you don't need him to even do that. You just have him to physically catch the innings if there's an injury, like, which would be both catchers going out, or you get risky and you take one catcher out of the game for whatever reason, for a pinch hitter or whatever, and then the other one gets hurt, and it's the 8th inning, and so Wilson has to end the game.
How many emergency catchers are used in baseball?
It's so rare, but I'm saying the Cardinals could flirt with it a little bit more this year, because they could get the most out of their roster if they're willing to. That's really all I mean by that, which is more to say, no, Fermin's usefulness is not in being a third righty bat off the bench, And it's also not in being a shortstop if Mason Wynn's going to play every day. Now, can Mason Wynn play every day? He's currently dealing with a wrist. He's had a sluggish spring. I don't know. Like, that's what we're going to find out. But the Cardinals are telling you that we were doing this anyway with Mason Wynn, regardless of whether Fermin was sitting in the dugout with a foam finger. Like, it doesn't make any difference. They'll actually use Siani for the role. And I think the other part of that is, are you concerned, Cardinals fans may be, that, well, Oliver Marmol really likes Michael Siani. He's going to write his name in the lineup too often to start games. And I would say,
is he going to be 2025 Matt Carpenter? Is that what it's going to be? Like, anytime you see him in the lineup, you're just going to get angry about it?
I'm going to say no, because if he's drawing more starts, if he's drawing that amount of starts, it's probably because the injury has happened somewhere, or the Gorman situation has veered off track and he's going down to Memphis for a spell. Like, I don't think you're going to see that very often with the complement of players that they have currently at the big league level. I could be wrong, but I wonder if that was part of the conversation and why it went down to the wire, where the front office might say, like, you know, how do we view Mason Wynn? Is he ready to go this route? And do we need to have that insurance on the roster? Or if there's a, heaven forbid, an injury, Donovan finishes that game at short and we make roster moves the next day to accommodate if need be, and we get more usefulness and utility out of that last spot. But hey, Oliver, if this is the way we go, we're all on the same page that it's Victor Scott's job, right? Yeah. It's not, you know, kind of a platoon between Vic and Siani where we're starting Siani a bunch. And Oli Marmol's quotes already tell you that he's exactly in that spot. This isn't a tryout. It's not an audition, he said. I believe I saw that quote from Derek Gould reporting this morning. Like, it's Victor Scott's job. So that means to me, the Siani role is actually pretty valuable off your bench as a weapon.
And I'm not even concerned. Like, and that's, again, the comparing him to Matt Carpenter is unfair, I think, to both players, but it's one of those where I don't think you're going to see a split between Victor Scott and Michael Siani.
I agree.
I think, if anything, it would be Victor Scott is kind of top of the line of a guy you're willing to rotate in and out of that 10 that we keep talking about, to where it's Nootbaar, it's Nootbaar in center, Donovan in left.
You won't see Lars Nootbaar in center. You won't see it once.
You don't think so?
Not if Gorman and Burleson are I think Victor's, you might see it once. You're not going to see it much at all, if at all, because both of the other center fielders are on the team, and the manager recognizes the value of defense in center field, and they've given him both center fielders. What you might see,
I think I'd bet you lunch that Nootbaar in the first four series,
the first 12 games.
So you got Twins, Angels, Red Sox, Pirates.
Let me send a quick text and I'll get back with you. Get some insight. No, I'm kidding. I'm not sure if I'd bet it, but here's my thought process.
I think Lars Nootbaar starts center field one of those first 12 games.
And he very well might. And so I rescind that you'll never see it. I don't think you'll see it much. I also think what you could see at some point, and I'm trying to think of what the handedness would be, because with Jordan Walker, the deal was always kind of reverse splits, at least to this point, but you'd think he develops into a hitter who maybe just doesn't have splits and can hit righties, hit lefties. But, like, could you see with a certain pitcher on the mound, whether it's Palante, Mikolas, more of a fly ball guy, in a certain situation where somebody could use a blow anyway, does it go Newt in left, Siani in center, Vic in right to start the game, and Walker's either the DH that day or he's out of the lineup because it's his day of the month not to play? You could see that. But the Nootbaar in center thing is, like, you don't really need it.
They did a good job in spring of having Siani and Victor Scott play right and left.
Yeah.
Even up until the day that I think it was on Sunday after they said, "Hey, Victor Scott's our starting center fielder," and then he wasn't.
I think Victor wasn't right. I think you'll have to see. I didn't look back. Did Siani play much right? I'm assuming it's going to be Siani in center, Vic in right when they're both in the game at the same time.
Okay.
But I could be wrong about that. I could be just as wrong about Nootbaar's never going to play center, because it's factual that they haven't gotten rid of the problem.
Let me know how many games you want to make that an interesting for you.
It is factual, to your point. It's factual that they haven't gotten rid of the problem of, okay, everybody agrees Vic's on the team. What do you do with the Gorman Burleson thing? Like, who plays, who sits? I don't know. We're going to see on opening day who plays, who sits, and I might lean 60-40 one way or the other, but I don't know if I can tell you definitively until they do. So I guess to your point, like, that would be the draw to getting Nootbaar in center. Nootbaar didn't play a lot of center toward the latter part of spring, which tells me, like, Victor Scott's just going to go play center. It's going to be more than 4 times a week that Victor Scott's going to play center. He's just going to play center, and he's going to be pretty much an everyday guy.
And again, if that's the case, if you're saying 4 times a week, and it's mostly
it's
6 games a week.
4. It's going to be more than that.
Yeah, it should be more. That's what I was saying.
Vic's going to play every day. I mean, he's just as much as Arenado.
10 shortstops in Major League Baseball last year played 155 games or more.
Okay.
So I'm still saying it's 162 or bust for Mason Wynn. I mean, maybe, after they clinch a playoff spot, maybe you give him the day off the next day and towards the end of the year. But if you're already to that point, you let him go the full 162.
If he's not injured, if there's no IL stint, I would take over 155.5. I don't know if I would take over 161.5 is my guess. Yeah. He'll sit a day or two, but
I'm not betting on that one. That's a bet I'm not going to take.
He's going to be their everyday shortstop, and there's no alternative on the team right now. But that could change. Like, this is day one. Lots of stuff's going to happen down the road. Like, Sajayce's going to be on the team in the second half. At some point, he's going to be on the team. I don't know what's going to cause it, but he's going to play for the Cardinals this year, and he could fill in at shortstop.
If you bring him up, does he have to play? Right? Or that's what Barrero has to. That's where I'm wondering where the I guess ranking is between those two.
Barrero doesn't have to play. He's not a prospect anymore. He's a guy who you signed to a minor league deal, and you were impressed with his spring. So you're glad to have the roster, the organizational depth. If anything, if it's a daily role, I think depending on how Sajayce and Barrero are playing in AAA, and I'll be curious too, like how much shortstop does Sajayce play the first month of the season versus is Barrero getting groomed as like, hey, if you're hitting, you can step right up and be a replacement if one was ever needed. Or if it's something that they just don't prioritize that much because, like you said, they're living in the world where Mason Wynn's going to play every day. And so, you cross a bridge when you get to it and you hope you never do. That's sort of the way they might look at it as well. But Sajayce, when he's on the team, there needs to be room for him, which could come from any number of the infield/outfielders getting injured to start whittling your way toward that being a reality. But he also has to be performing at the time, too.
Hey, this is Cards Hub 365, powered by our friends over at Gray Bar. If you're still suffering from supply chain issues and they're disrupting your operations, have no fear because Gray Bar has you covered, and you can rely on their nationwide logistics network to get what you need, where they need, when they need to get there, and all within budget. Gray Bar, trusted and leading North American distributor of electrical communications and data networking and industrial products. Here's what you need to do. Visit graybar.com to start an order today. That's graybar.com, and fix those supply chain issues with Gray Bar, your distributor for electrical and data comm needs. Tomorrow, Brendan, it's me and you back at it again.
Okay.
And I think we've fully covered the roster breakdown portion of this. Very much looking forward to getting into more of what's it going to look like now? Like, what's the lineup going to look like? I think we have 8 or 9 different options on the website right now of our Sports Hub staff that we've put out there.
And now that we know Vic's on the team, I think I originally had Nootbaar as the center fielder because until he proved that Victor was going to be on the team, I didn't know the Cardinals were going to do it, and I credit them for doing it. So yeah, I'll have to update my own personal projection based on that. Then it gets to a conversation: who bats leadoff? Because it's been Mason Wynn. They haven't really bumped Mason Wynn down in the spring. He's stayed in that spot, but you could make a case that Victor would be another compelling candidate. Lars Nootbaar and Brendan Donovan would be compelling candidates. And what would the fallout be to the rest of the lineup? So we can take our stab at trying to figure that out too.
And that article coming to hottest take from our Cardinal staff.
I still got to submit mine. I got a couple ideas. Got a couple plans.
Look forward to seeing what those are across the board. Also, too, hey, you've already seen the post-game shows that we've done for the Blues, that we did for Mizzou, that we did for SLU. We have post-game shows, 162 of them, to go along with the 365 Cardinal shows that we do every year. That's a lot of shows, a lot of Cardinal talk here on Sports Hub STL. Those post-game shows will begin Thursday, right after the Cardinals and Twins first game of the year. Again, Cardinals and Memphis tonight. I didn't see who's pitching for that tonight. I haven't seen lineups. I haven't seen pitching.
I haven't seen anything. I'm not there. I'm not at it.
I can't remember who it was that's pitching for Memphis. I did see they announced that. I didn't see who was pitching for the Cardinals for tonight. But that game, I believe, radio only.
Okay.
Matt Pauley and Benji Molina on the radio call for that.
Very cool.
If you're driving around, or you just take the radio or take your phone outside, you can listen to that game.
And it looks like the rotation, according to Denton from about a day ago, is Gray, Fetty, Palante, Mikolas, Liberatore. So I would guess that the only person super plausible to be pitching today would be Fetty, maybe
Fetty pitched
Palante.
yesterday.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So Palante, it would be, yeah, that's right. We skipped another day since the sunny start. Yeah. So Palante, I would assume, is today, but I don't know. I haven't seen it.
Yesterday's a weird day on the schedule. Like the roster's announced, the players all want to leave.
And they were doing a game. Yeah.
And you had to play a game yesterday. It had to have been a weird game yesterday down there in Jupiter with you talk about an away getaway day.
That's what it is.
That's the ultimate getaway day when you're finally just ready to be done with spring training and get to games that matter.
Yep.
My gosh.
We're finally just about here, though.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been a long journey, but I'm excited because it's going to mean 2 Cardinal shows a day on Sports Hub and more topics to really dig into and talk about once we see these games start to be happening. Yeah.
Hey, before we get out of here, I do just want to take a quick moment and just talk about a guy that Brendan, you and I both worked with that was tragically killed this past weekend. Brian McKenna, a guy that you and I both worked in radio with. Just thoughts go out to all of his family and friends. A guy that did so much for so many people over the years in the St. Louis community, and never had a bad thing to say about him.
Yeah, Brian and Jeff Gordon were the co-hosts of like the first show I ever ran the board for at 590 The Fan. And over the years since, Brian, anytime I'd run into him, he just had that energy about him and that positive outlook, despite all, a lot of stuff had happened to him in recent years with a battle with cancer and just a ton of medical situations that he was dealing with. And the fact that you would never find a more positive, upbeat person in your life, despite all of that kind of stuff that he had been dealing with, was a testament to just the kind of guy he was. And it just is still tough, Joe, because it just feels like a guy who goes through all that and has it, to have this happen is truly like tragic. That's the word that comes to mind for me. And so he will be missed. And it's something I've thought a lot about this weekend, just, trying to every day embody a little bit of what Brian was all about and do better about bringing more of that to my life, because he is the kind of guy where you really do say he left an impact.
He absolutely did. He will be missed. We will be back at it again tomorrow, 1:00. Hey, and 1:00, moving it up now that we are done with spring training games.
There you go.
So Cards Hub 365 every day at 1:00, unless there is a one of those early games and it's baseball for breakfast on those days before the Randy Carricker show featuring Brooke Grimsley. So we will talk to you tomorrow. Looking forward to that. He is Brendan Schaefer. I'm Joe Roderick. Talk to you next time right here on Cards Hub 365, presented by Gray Bar here on Sports Hub STL.